It was a quiet afternoon in a small restaurant tucked in the corner of a busy street. The kind of place that smelled of fresh bread and warm soup, where the chatter of diners mixed with the soft clinking of dishes. The sunlight came through the windows, casting golden streaks across the wooden floors. People were enjoying their meals, talking quietly with friends or scrolling through their phones. And the mood was generally calm. At one of the tables near the window, a young girl sat in a wheelchair beside her mother. The girl had soft brown hair that fell over her shoulders and big, curious eyes that always seemed to be taking in the world around her. She had a gentle smile, shy but warm, and she held onto the edges of her wheelchair tightly, a little unsure of her surroundings. Her mother was kind and patient, always watching her daughter carefully, making sure she was comfortable. They had come to this restaurant because it was one of the few that felt accessible and welcoming. At first, everything seemed normal. The girl and her mother were quietly eating their lunch, enjoying a small plate of soup and some sandwiches. The girl's spoon trembled slightly in her hand, but she was careful, making sure not to spill anything. Her mother smiled encouragingly, praising her for being so careful. They laughed softly at little jokes, and for a moment, it felt like the world had slowed down just for them. But then, at a nearby table, a group of teenagers started to notice them. At first, it was just glances, quick and casual. But the glances turned into whispers, and the whispers grew louder. The girl's wheelchair caught their attention, and instead of curiosity, they responded with mockery. One of the boys pointed and snickered, nudging his friend, who laughed so loudly that several diners looked over. "Look at that," one whispered, but it was loud enough for the girl to hear. "She can't even walk properly." The girl's face turned red. Her mother immediately looked up, her eyes sharp with concern. She could see the pain in her daughter's eyes, the hurt that came from feeling exposed and laughed at. The girl lowered her head slightly, trying to make herself smaller, hoping the teasing would stop. But the teens were relentless. They leaned closer, whispering things they thought were funny, snickering and laughing with each other. It wasn't just rude, it was cruel. One of the girls from the group reached over and lightly tossed a napkin toward the wheelchair. It landed on the seat beside the girl. She flinched, startled, and looked at her mother for reassurance. Her mother immediately spoke up, her voice firm but calm. "Please, that's not funny. You need to stop." Instead of stopping, the teens laughed even louder. "Oh, is she scared?" One mocked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Doesn't she have anyone to help her?" The other diners in the restaurant shifted in their seats. Some frowned, some looked away, and a few whispered quietly among themselves. No one stood up to say anything, and that silence made the teasing feel even worse. The girl felt trapped, embarrassed in front of everyone. Her fingers gripped the armrest of her wheelchair so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She wanted to disappear, to escape the cruel attention, but there was nowhere to go. Her mother took a deep breath, trying to keep her own fear and frustration in check. She leaned down and gently placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Ignore them," she whispered softly. "They don't matter. They don't understand, and that's okay. We'll just enjoy our lunch." The girl nodded, trying to follow her mother's advice, but the laughter from the table nearby kept echoing in her ears. She felt small, almost invisible, and a quiet tear ran down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away, hoping no one had seen. Her mother noticed and gave her a reassuring smile, squeezing her hand. The teens, however, were not done. One of the boys leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Hey, can you even eat by yourself?" he asked, loud enough for the girl to hear clearly. The girl's hand shook slightly as she lifted her spoon to her mouth. She tried to ignore him, focused on her food, but it was difficult. Every bite felt like a challenge, every glance from the table a reminder that she was being judged unfairly. At that moment, something shifted in the atmosphere of the restaurant. The air felt heavier, filled with tension. The other diners were watching more closely now, some glancing at the teens with disapproval, others unsure if they should intervene. The girl's mother straightened in her seat, her eyes scanning the restaurant, silently pleading for someone to step in. She knew she had to protect her daughter, but she also knew she couldn't control what was happening outside of their little table. The girl tried to focus on the warmth of the soup in her hands, the gentle hum of the restaurant around her, but the ridicule made it hard. Her cheeks burned, not just from embarrassment, but from the sense of isolation. She was surrounded by people, yet she felt completely alone. She wanted to speak up to tell them to stop, but her voice felt stuck, small and powerless. The mother noticed her daughter's struggle and leaned closer. "You're brave," she whispered, her voice soft but steady. "It's not easy, but you are strong. Don't let them make you feel less than you are. You're amazing, and I'm proud of you." The girl looked up at her mother, feeling a small spark of courage. Her mother's words gave her a little strength, enough to lift her head and meet the eyes of the bullies, if only for a moment. She could feel the tears threatening again, but this time she held them back. She focused on her breathing, on the small victories of sitting tall in her chair, on the warmth of her mother's hand holding hers. Meanwhile, the teens continued to whisper and snicker, unaware that their laughter had lost some of its power. The girl was still nervous, but she was beginning to find a little bit of her own voice, even in the face of their cruelty. The mother's presence, calm and protective, acted like a shield around her, and for a moment, it seemed like nothing else could reach them. But just as the tension seemed unbearable, the restaurant doors opened, letting in a gust of cool air. Every head turned instinctively to see who had entered. The quiet hum of conversation stopped abruptly, replaced by the creaking sound of boots against the wooden floor. A tall, broad man walked in, his presence immediately noticeable. He wore a leather vest with bold patches and the unmistakable look of someone who was part of a motorcycle club. His steps were deliberate, confident, and every eye in the room followed him. For the first time, the laughter from the teens faltered. They noticed him, the way he carried himself, the intensity in his gaze. Something about him demanded attention, demanded respect. He scanned the restaurant, and then his eyes fell on the girl and her mother. He didn't rush or act aggressively. He simply walked toward their table, and the air around him seemed to shift. The room went silent. The girl's mother looked at him, uncertain at first, but the man's expression was calm, almost gentle. He knelt slightly to the girl's level, smiling reassuringly. "Hey there," he said softly. "Don't worry. You're okay." The girl blinked, surprised by his kindness. She had expected someone big like him to be scary, but instead he radiated a quiet strength that made her feel safe for the first time that day. The teens nearby were frozen, their earlier confidence gone, replaced with nervous unease. The man's presence alone had silenced them, and for the first time the girl felt like she could breathe again. Her mother exhaled, relief washing over her. She didn't know this man, but she could see that his presence alone was enough to protect her daughter, at least for now. The girl gave a small smile, a timid one at first, but it grew as she realized that the world wasn't entirely cruel. There were people who could make it better, even in the smallest, most unexpected ways. And in that quiet moment, with the restaurant watching and the teens shrinking back in shame, the girl realized something important. She could survive the cruelty of others. She could find strength in her mother's support and in the kindness of strangers. And maybe, just maybe, she could find her own voice in a world that often seemed determined to silence her. The atmosphere in the restaurant shifted almost instantly when the man entered. The soft hum of conversation, the clatter of dishes, even the quiet background music seemed to pause for a moment. Every head turned to watch him walk, his leather vest and patches signaling that he was not someone to be trifled with. He moved with a calm confidence, the kind of presence that made people aware of their actions without a single word. The group of teenagers who had been laughing at the girl suddenly grew uneasy. Their earlier confidence vanished, replaced with nervous glances at each other. The leader of the group, the one who had tossed the napkin, swallowed hard, trying to maintain some semblance of bravado. But it was clear that the man's presence had unsettled them. The man's eyes met theirs for just a moment. There was no yelling, no threats, no need for loud words. Just the way he looked at them, steady, serious, and uncompromising, made it clear that their behavior was unacceptable. The teens looked down at their hands, shifting uncomfortably in their chairs. They had mocked someone vulnerable, and now the weight of their actions felt heavy. Meanwhile, the girl in the wheelchair felt a strange mixture of awe and relief. The fear and humiliation she had been carrying began to ease. The man knelt slightly to her level, his eyes kind and calm. He smiled gently, giving her a sense of safety she had not felt all day. "Hey," he said softly. "Don't worry. You're okay now." She blinked at him, unsure of what to say. The words that had been trapped in her throat since the teasing began seemed to loosen slightly. Her mother gave a small, thankful smile, relieved that her daughter finally had someone to shield her from the cruel laughter. The teens, noticing that their mocking had completely lost its edge, tried to mutter something dismissive, but their voices faltered. One of them cleared his throat nervously. We were just joking," he said, but it came out weak and unconvincing. The man didn't reply immediately. He stood upright slowly, towering over the table, and his gaze swept across the restaurant. Every diner felt the weight of his presence. There was no anger in his eyes, only an unspoken authority, the kind that told everyone that cruelty toward someone else would not be tolerated. The teens shrank in their seats, realizing that they had crossed a line they didn't fully understand until now. He turned back to the girl, crouching down again to her level. "You don't have to be afraid," he said. His voice was low, calm, and full of reassurance. "People can be cruel, but that doesn't make you less than them. You're stronger than you think." The girl's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were different. Not tears of shame or hurt, but tears of relief and hope. She felt seen, valued, and protected in a way that she hadn't in a long time. Her mother gently wiped the tear from her cheek and held her hand, whispering, "See, there are kind people in this world. Don't let them make you feel small." The teens shifted uneasily, clearly embarrassed. One of them tried to laugh it off, hoping to regain control of the situation. "Come on, it was just a joke," he muttered, but it sounded hollow even to him. The man's eyes met his again, and the teenager froze. He could feel the quiet power in that gaze, the kind that demanded respect without a single raised voice. "Jokes at someone else's expense aren't funny," the man said calmly but firmly, "especially when they're trying their best to live their life like everyone else." His words were measured, but each one hit hard. The teens looked at each other, unsure of how to respond, and slowly the laughter and whispers died completely. The other diners, who had been watching quietly, began to feel a sense of relief. Some nodded subtly at the girl and her mother, a silent acknowledgement that they had witnessed something important. The restaurant, which had been tense and uncomfortable just moments ago, began to breathe again, as if the presence of this one man had reset the atmosphere. The girl, encouraged by the calm support around her, straightened in her wheelchair. She felt a little taller, a little braver. The man smiled at her, giving her that small but important reassurance that she was not alone. Her mother looked at him gratefully, unable to put into words how thankful she was for this unexpected ally. The teens, now clearly intimidated, started to gather their belongings. One of them muttered something under his breath and pushed back from the table. The others followed, leaving quickly without another word. The sound of their hurried footsteps faded, leaving the restaurant quiet once again. The girl's mother exhaled deeply, a mix of relief and gratitude washing over her. "Thank you," she whispered to the man. "I don't know what we would have done without you." The man waved his hand dismissively, but there was a warmth in his eyes. "Just doing what anyone should do," he said. "No one deserves to be humiliated like that. Remember, you're stronger than you think. Don't let anyone take that away from you." The girl's mother nodded, her voice shaking slightly. "We won't forget this. Thank you for standing up for her." The girl looked at the man with a small, shy smile. For the first time that day, she felt like the world wasn't against her. She realized that even when people were cruel, there were always those who could show kindness and protect others. The experience had shaken her, but it also taught her something important. She could survive the cruelty of others, and she could find people who would stand with her when she needed it most. The man stayed just long enough to ensure that the situation had truly ended. He glanced around the restaurant, making sure that everyone felt the shift in energy, that the teasing was over and that respect had returned. Then, without a word, he turned and left. The sound of the door closing behind him seemed to mark the end of the tension, leaving a quiet sense of calm in the air. The girl's mother held her daughter close, feeling the tension of the past hour slowly melt away. She could see the change in her daughter, the way she sat a little taller, the spark of confidence returning to her eyes. It wasn't just about the man who had walked in. It was about the realization that people could care, that there was courage and kindness, and that even the smallest acts could change a difficult situation completely. The girl took a deep breath and smiled at her mother. "I feel better," she said softly. Her voice was quiet, but it carried a newfound strength. Her mother smiled back, squeezing her hand. "You should. You're brave, and you handled it better than anyone could ask." The other diners slowly returned to their conversations, and the restaurant began to hum with life again. But the moment lingered, a memory of courage, kindness, and unexpected protection that would stay with the girl and her mother forever. For the girl, that day had been full of emotions: fear, humiliation, hope, and relief. She had experienced cruelty, yes, but she had also experienced the power of someone standing up for what was right. The lesson was simple, yet profound. Even in the face of ridicule and meanness, kindness and courage could make all the difference. And as she wheeled herself carefully toward the exit later that afternoon, she held her mother's hand tightly, feeling stronger than before. She knew that life could be difficult, and people could be cruel, but she also knew that she could face it with resilience, and that there were people out there who would help her when she needed it most. That unexpected intervention had changed the way she saw the world. It had reminded her that not everyone was unkind, that strength came in many forms, and that sometimes help came from the most surprising places. And in that small, quiet restaurant, with sunlight still streaming through the windows, the girl finally felt safe, valued, and understood, a feeling she would carry with her long after she left that day. The restaurant slowly returned to its usual rhythm after the confrontation, but the tension had left a mark on everyone present. The clatter of cutlery, soft murmurs of conversation, and the gentle hum of the air conditioner filled the space again. Yet something had shifted. People were quieter, more aware, and perhaps a little kinder in their glances. The teens who had mocked the girl had retreated into a corner booth, their confidence shattered and replaced with awkward embarrassment. They avoided eye contact, fidgeting nervously, unsure how to behave now that the room's balance had been disturbed. Meanwhile, the girl sat in her wheelchair with her mother beside her, feeling a strange mix of relief, gratitude, and newfound strength. She had never experienced such a clear display of support before, and it left her mind buzzing with questions. Who was this man? Why had he helped her? And most importantly, why had no one else stepped in before? She looked up at her mother, searching for reassurance. Her mother squeezed her hand gently. "Sometimes, kindness comes from the most unexpected places," she said softly. "What matters is that someone saw the wrong and decided to make it right. That's what's important." The girl nodded slowly. She wanted to speak, to thank the man, but he had already left. All that remained was the sense of safety he had provided and the invisible shield he had created around her. It was a strange feeling, like a small island of peace in the middle of chaos. As they continued eating, the girl's mind wandered back to the teens. Their laughter had been cruel, yes, but now she realized that their behavior said more about them than about her. They had mocked her because they did not understand, because they found amusement in someone else's vulnerability. And that realization, though simple, gave her a sense of clarity she hadn't had before. She wasn't the problem. Their ignorance and cruelty were. Her mother noticed the shift in her daughter's demeanor. "You're thinking too much," she said gently, smiling. "Just focus on your lunch. You've handled this very well." The girl smiled faintly, trying to relax. She picked up her spoon again, and this time, she took a bite without flinching. The taste of the food, warm and comforting, grounded her in the present. It reminded her that despite the cruelty she had faced, life continued. There were still simple joys, like the smell of bread, the taste of soup, and the gentle support of someone who loved her unconditionally. But even as she tried to enjoy the meal, the memory of the man lingered. She couldn't stop thinking about how he had walked in, calm yet commanding, and how he had changed the energy in the room simply by being himself. It was a power unlike anything she had seen. Not the power to hurt or intimidate, but the power to protect and restore balance. Her mother, sensing her curiosity, leaned closer. "He's probably someone who believes in standing up for what's right," she said softly. "Some people are like that. They see someone being treated unfairly and they act. You were lucky he was here. The girl nodded again, letting the words sink in. She felt a spark of inspiration, a tiny flame that whispered she could be brave too, even if only in small ways. She realized that courage didn't always come from strength or size. Sometimes it came from the willingness to act, to defend what is right, and to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Meanwhile, the teens in the corner were still murmuring among themselves, their earlier arrogance replaced with unease. One of them finally spoke, his voice low and uncertain. Maybe we went too far, he admitted, though it sounded more like an attempt to save face than genuine remorse. Another nodded, but none of them dared to approach the girl or her mother. The presence of the man had left a lasting impression, not just on the victims, but on the aggressors as well. They had learned, in a single moment, that actions had consequences and that sometimes the world had protectors ready to intervene when cruelty went too far. As the meal continued, the girl's mother decided it was time to leave. She helped her daughter maneuver her wheelchair toward the exit, making sure she was comfortable and steady. The girl's hands rested on the armrests, her mind still racing with thoughts of the afternoon's events. When they stepped outside, the sunlight felt warmer, softer, almost like a reward for enduring the earlier humiliation. The air was filled with the sounds of the city. Cars passing by, people chatting on the sidewalks, birds chirping in the nearby trees. It was a busy world, full of motion and life, and yet, for a moment, the girl felt a calm certainty. She had faced something difficult and she had survived. More importantly, she had been seen and supported, and that made all the difference. Her mother guided her down the ramp outside the restaurant, making sure the wheelchair moved smoothly. You know, she said, sometimes the smallest acts can mean the most. What happened today will stay with you, and it might even help you help someone else someday. The girl thought about those words carefully. She imagined herself standing up for someone else, someone who was scared or hurt. The thought brought a nervous excitement, or a mixture of anticipation and hope. Maybe she could be brave in her own way, just like the man who had intervened. As they walked along the street, the girl's eyes wandered to the horizon. She noticed the way the sunlight reflected off the windows of nearby buildings, the way the trees swayed gently in the breeze, and the way the world seemed both vast and full of possibility. The day's events, though difficult, had opened her eyes to the idea that the world could be both cruel and kind at the same time. Back in the restaurant, life had returned to normal, but the energy lingered. Other diners whispered quietly about what they had witnessed, sharing small expressions of respect and admiration for the man who had intervened. Some even reflected on their own behavior, considering how they could act more courageously in the future. The atmosphere, though calm, had been subtly changed by a single act of kindness. For the girl, that day would always remain vivid in her memory. She would remember the fear she felt, the embarrassment, and the way the laughter had made her feel small. But she would also remember the warmth of her mother's hand, the calm and protective presence of the man, and the way the restaurant had collectively held its breath in the moment of tension. She realized that courage wasn't always loud or visible. Sometimes it came quietly, in the actions of someone who chose to act when it mattered most. And sometimes it came from within, the quiet determination to not let the cruelty of others define you. As the girl and her mother continued their walk, she felt a little stronger, a little more certain of herself. The world could be unpredictable, and people could be cruel, but she now understood that she could face challenges with resilience. She could find support in others, and she could even imagine herself becoming someone who would help when the situation demanded it. The city around them bustled with life, but the girl felt a sense of calm. She had experienced a difficult moment and had come through it. More importantly, she had learned something valuable, that kindness, courage, and protection could come from unexpected places, and that sometimes the presence of someone strong and caring could change everything. The girl's mother noticed the change in her daughter's demeanor. "You're smiling," she said softly. "I can see it in your eyes. You're feeling stronger, aren't you?" The girl nodded, a small but genuine smile spreading across her face. "Yes," she said quietly. "I feel stronger, and maybe braver too." Her mother hugged her gently, a feeling of pride swelling in her chest. "That's wonderful. Remember this feeling. Remember that courage comes in many forms, and remember that you are never alone even when the world seems cruel." The girl clutched her mother's hand tightly. feeling the warmth and support that had carried her through the day. The memory of the man in the leather vest lingered in her mind, a symbol of protection, strength, and kindness. She realized that people like him existed in the world, and that gave her hope. And as they walked further down the street, the girl felt a renewed sense of possibility. She had faced fear, humiliation, and uncertainty, but she had also experienced courage, protection, and kindness. That balance, she understood, was what life was truly about. The girl glanced up at the sky, the sunlight glinting off the buildings and streets. She felt a quiet determination growing inside her, a belief that she could face future challenges with strength and dignity. And while she knew there would be difficult moments ahead, she also knew that she had the courage to meet them, and that sometimes, help could come from the most unexpected of places. The restaurant had returned to its usual rhythm, but a tension still lingered in the air, almost like a quiet shadow of what had happened. The girl and her mother sat back at their table trying to enjoy their meal, yet both were aware of the subtle energy around them. Even though the teens had retreated to a corner booth, the discomfort from the earlier incident hadn't fully faded. People whispered softly among themselves, casting curious glances toward the girl, the mother, and the empty spot where the man in the leather vest had been. The girl picked at her sandwich, her appetite returning slowly. Her mother watched her carefully, noticing the mixture of relief and lingering anxiety in her daughter's eyes. She wanted to reassure her again, to remind her that she had handled the situation with incredible courage, but words seemed small compared to the storm of emotions the girl had experienced. Then, as if on cue, the restaurant door opened again. The sound of it echoed slightly, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. People paused, forks midway to their mouths, conversations halting mid-sentence. The teens in the corner stiffened instantly, their eyes widening as the man in the leather vest stepped inside once more. This time, the atmosphere felt different, heavier, charged. The man moved with the same calm confidence as before, but there was a clear purpose in his steps. He wasn't just passing through. He had returned for a reason. The girl's heart skipped a beat as she watched him approach. Something in his gaze told her that the bullies, who had only just regained a semblance of composure, were about to face consequences they hadn't anticipated. He stopped a few feet from the table and scanned the room slowly, taking in the tense faces of the teens. They tried to look casual, but the way they shifted in their seats betrayed them. Their earlier smugness was gone, replaced with fear and uncertainty. It was clear that they hadn't expected anyone to take their behavior seriously, and now they were learning the hard truth. The man's eyes locked on the group of teens. He didn't shout or raise his voice. He didn't need to. His presence alone was commanding, enough to silence even the loudest among them. "You need to leave," he said calmly but firmly, his voice low and steady. Every word carried weight, leaving no room for argument. The teens exchanged nervous glances. One of them tried to mutter, "We didn't mean any," but the words caught in his throat. The man's gaze was unwavering, patient but intense, and it made them shrink back in their seats. The room seemed to hold its breath, every diner watching the confrontation unfold silently. The girl's mother placed a protective hand over her daughter's. She felt a surge of relief, knowing that the man had returned not just as a presence but as an active protector. Her heart raced with gratitude as she realized that her daughter would no longer have to face these bullies alone. The man walked toward the teens slowly, deliberately. Each step was measured, steady, and calm, yet the power in his stride was undeniable. The teens fidgeted, unable to meet his eyes. The leader of the group, the one who had been the loudest, swallowed hard, trying to maintain some semblance of courage. But it was futile. The man's calm authority stripped away any pretense of bravado, exposing their fear and shame. "You humiliated someone who didn't deserve it," the man said, his voice even but sharp. "You mocked a girl for something she can't control. That's not a joke. That's cruelty." The teens looked at each other nervously, trying to gauge if there was a way out of the situation. But the man didn't wait for a response. He stood a little closer, maintaining the same calm yet commanding tone. "I'm giving you one chance. Leave now, apologize if you want, and never act like that again. Otherwise, you'll regret it." The teen's earlier confidence had completely evaporated. One of them muttered, Okay, we get it," and pushed back from the table, his hands trembling slightly. The others followed quietly, their heads bowed. Their whispered excuses were drowned out by the murmurs of other diners who had been watching in awe. The girl watched in amazement, her heart racing. The man had not yelled, had not thrown threats, yet he had commanded respect and changed the dynamic completely. For the first time that day, she felt a deep sense of safety, knowing that the bullies had been stopped and that no one could humiliate her again in that space. Her mother squeezed her hand gently, noticing the look of awe on her daughter's face. "See? Courage doesn't always come from anger or shouting," she whispered. "Sometimes it comes quietly, in the way someone stands for what's right." The man turned toward the girl and her mother once more, crouching slightly to meet their eyes. His gaze was kind, reassuring. "You don't have to be afraid." "Not here, not with me around," he said softly. "People will try to hurt you, but you're stronger than you think. Don't let anyone make you feel small." The girl's eyes filled with tears again, but these were not tears of fear or shame. They were tears of relief, gratitude, and hope. She nodded slowly, feeling a warm sense of courage bloom inside her. She realized that strength wasn't about being loud or fierce. It could also come from quiet support, from someone choosing to stand up for what's right. The man gave a small smile and stood upright. "Remember this," he said. "Kindness and courage are stronger than cruelty. Protect them, and never be afraid to stand up for yourself or others." Then, just as quietly as he had arrived, he turned and walked toward the exit. The sound of the door closing behind him left a strange kind of silence in the room, a silence that felt full, not empty. It was as if the restaurant itself had absorbed the lesson of the day, that courage and compassion could make a difference, even in small, everyday places. The girl's mother exhaled deeply, relief washing over her in waves. She looked at her daughter, whose eyes were wide with wonder and understanding. "You see?" she said softly. "Even when things feel impossible, there are people who will help, and there are ways to stay strong. Never forget that." The girl nodded, feeling a quiet determination. She realized that life would not always be easy, and that people could still be cruel. But she now had a new sense of confidence. She could face difficulties, knowing that courage and kindness existed, and that sometimes help could come from the most unexpected places. Outside the restaurant, the city hummed with life. Cars passed by, people hurried along the sidewalks, and the sunlight gleamed off the windows of nearby buildings. The girl and her mother slowly made their way down the ramp, savoring the calm after the storm of emotions. The world seemed bigger, fuller, and more alive than it had before. The girl's mother kept a gentle hand on her daughter's shoulder, feeling proud and amazed at how strong she had been. "You've learned a lot today," she said softly. "You've seen cruelty, yes, but you've also seen courage. And remember this feeling, the way it feels to be safe and supported." The girl nodded, her fingers gripping the armrest of her wheelchair firmly. She felt a new sense of power, not the kind that comes from being loud or dominating, but the quiet strength that comes from knowing you can survive, and that there are people in the world who will stand with you when it matters most. Back inside the restaurant, the atmosphere had changed permanently. The other diners whispered quietly about what had happened, their admiration clear in their eyes. The bullies had left, but the memory of the intervention remained, a lesson in courage, justice, and compassion. It was a moment that would be remembered not just by the girl, but by everyone who had witnessed it. For the girl, the day had been transformative. She had felt fear, shame, and uncertainty, but she had also experienced relief, courage, and the quiet power of standing up for what is right. She had learned that even small acts, a calm voice, a protective presence, a simple gesture of kindness, could change everything. As she wheeled herself down the street later that afternoon, the girl felt a sense of hope she had never felt before. She knew the world could still be cruel, but she had learned that courage and kindness could prevail, and that she could carry that lesson with her wherever she went. Her mother smiled at her, sensing the change in her daughter's spirit. "You're going to be okay," she said softly. "You've seen the power of courage today. Remember it, and use it when you need to." The girl looked up at the sky, sunlight reflecting off the buildings, and felt a quiet determination growing inside her. She had faced cruelty, yes, but she had also witnessed courage and protection, and in that balance she realized that she could navigate the challenges of life with strength, dignity, and hope. The day was winding down, and the sun had started its slow descent, casting a warm golden glow over the city. The girl and her mother were leaving the restaurant, feeling lighter than when they had arrived. What had started as a day full of fear, embarrassment, and uncertainty had turned into a story of courage, protection, and unexpected kindness. The girl's wheelchair wheels rolled smoothly over the sidewalk as she held her mother's hand, a quiet determination growing inside her. As they moved down the street, the girl reflected on the events of the afternoon. She remembered the teens, their mocking faces, and the way her heart had raced with fear and shame. She remembered the whispers, the laughter that made her feel small, and the tears she had tried to hide. But she also remembered the man in the leather vest, one calm, strong, and kind. His presence had changed everything. He had not shouted, not threatened, yet he had commanded respect and silenced cruelty with nothing more than his calm authority. The girl thought about the lesson in courage she had witnessed. Courage did not always come with loud words or aggression. Sometimes it came quietly, in the form of standing up for someone else and the decision to intervene when others are being hurt. It was a lesson she had never fully understood before, but now it felt real and important. Her mother glanced at her, noticing the thoughtful expression on her daughter's face. "You've been very brave today," she said softly. "And not just during what happened in the restaurant. You've been brave every moment you faced those laughs, every time you felt embarrassed. I hope you remember that." The girl nodded, a small smile appearing on her face. "I do," she said quietly. "I feel stronger. I think I understand now." They continued walking, their conversation turning to lighter topics. The smell of fresh bread from a nearby bakery, the sound of children playing in a park nearby, the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. These small details helped the girl ground herself in the present, and the warmth of the sun on her face made her feel safe and comforted. The girl's mind wandered back to the man in the leather vest. She wondered who he was, what had brought him to that restaurant, and why he had cared enough to help. But more than that, she thought about the way he had made her feel, safe, valued, and strong. That feeling stayed with her, stronger than any fear she had felt earlier. It was a reminder that there were people in the world who could make a difference, people who could change the course of a difficult moment with their presence, their courage, and their kindness. Her mother, sensing her thoughts, squeezed her hand gently. "You know," she said, "sometimes the people who change our lives appear for just a moment. They leave a mark that stays with us even if we never see them again. It's not always about knowing who they are. It's about feeling the impact of their actions." The girl thought about that carefully. She realized that she didn't need to know everything about the man to appreciate what he had done. The lesson was in his actions, the kindness he had shown, and the way he had made her feel safe in a moment when the world had seemed cruel. That was enough. As they continued along the street, the girl noticed the world around her with new awareness. She noticed the kindness in small gestures, a stranger holding a door open, a shopkeeper greeting customers with a smile, a mother guiding her child across the street. It was as if the events of the day had opened her eyes to the quiet courage and compassion that existed everywhere, often unnoticed. The girl's mother glanced at her, smiling. "I hope you carry that with you," she said. "Not just the fear or the sadness, but the strength, the courage, and the kindness you've witnessed today." "That's what matters." The girl nodded again, feeling a quiet sense of resolve. She thought about the future, imagining herself facing challenges with the courage she had learned to recognize. She thought about moments when she might need to stand up for herself or for others, and she realized that she had the power to make a difference too. When they reached their home, the girl felt a sense of calm settle over her. She had faced humiliation, fear, and uncertainty, but she had also experienced relief, support, and courage. The lessons of the day were clear. Cruelty could be confronted, courage could be found in unexpected ways, and kindness could change everything. Her mother helped her get settled in her room, and they sat together quietly for a few moments. The girl's mind was still buzzing, but she felt a deep sense of gratitude. "Thank you for being with me," she said softly. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Her mother smiled warmly. "You're the one who faced everything," she said. "I was just here to support you. Remember that bravery isn't just about being fearless. It's about continuing even when you're scared. And today you showed that in ways you might not even realize." The girl thought about that, reflecting on the moments when she had felt small and afraid, and how she had continued despite it. She remembered the man who had intervened, and she realized that courage was not just something she could witness, it was something she could carry within herself. Later that evening, as the sun set and the sky turned shades of pink and gold, the girl sat by her window looking out at the city. She thought about the restaurant, the teasing teens, and the man who had changed everything with his quiet presence. She thought about the lessons she had learned, about kindness, courage, and standing up for what is right. And she felt a quiet determination settle in her chest. She knew that life would have challenges. She knew there would be moments of fear, uncertainty, and even cruelty. But she also knew that she had the strength to face those moments, that she had the courage to protect herself and others, and that kindness could always make a difference. Her mother joined her at the window, sitting quietly beside her. "You're thinking a lot," she said gently. "Do you feel ready for tomorrow?" The girl nodded slowly, a small smile playing on her lips. "Yes," she said. "I feel ready. I feel stronger than I thought I could be." Her mother wrapped an arm around her, holding her close. "That's wonderful," she said softly. "Never forget that feeling. It will guide you when things get hard, and it will remind you that you're never truly alone." The girl leaned against her mother, feeling the warmth and support that had carried her through the day. She thought about the man in the leather vest once more, about the way he had appeared when she needed him most. She realized that life sometimes sent help in unexpected forms, and that those moments could change everything. As the night fell and the city lights began to twinkle, the girl felt a deep sense of peace. The events of the day had taught her something important, that courage could be quiet, that kindness could be powerful, and that even in moments of fear, strength could be found. She thought about the teens and their cruel laughter, and she realized that their words no longer had power over her. She had seen what courage looked like. She had felt protection and kindness, and she had discovered strength within herself. The memory of the afternoon was no longer one of fear and shame. It was a story of resilience, hope, and human connection. The girl whispered softly to herself, almost as a promise, "I will be brave. I will be kind. I will stand up when it matters." Her mother smiled, sensing the quiet determination in her daughter. She knew that the day had been transformative, that the girl had faced a trial and emerged stronger, and that the lesson she had learned would stay with her for a lifetime. And as the night deepened, the girl felt a profound sense of gratitude for her mother's love, for the kindness of a stranger who had stood up for her, and for the strength she had discovered within herself. She understood more than ever that the world could be both cruel and kind, and that she had the courage to navigate it with grace and dignity. The girl closed her eyes, letting the warmth of her mother's embrace and the memory of the day's events settle in her heart. She felt ready for whatever challenges might come next, confident in the knowledge that courage, kindness, and strength were not just things she could witness. They were things she could carry with her, wherever she went. And with that, the girl drifted into a peaceful sleep, dreaming not of fear but of hope, resilience, and the quiet power of standing up for what is right.